Good evening. I'm going to call to order the January 3rd, 2018, the very first meeting of 2018 for the Ottawa City Commission. We will begin our meeting with a roll call, followed by the welcome from me and the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kaler.
Present.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Present.
Commissioner Graves.
Present.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Present.
Commissioner Crowley.
Present.
Thank you to all those that are in the audience today and those that may be watching on some kind of electronic format. We are always glad that when you're part of the process, we are here to represent you. So we appreciate your time that you give us and for putting in this spot to represent you as the City of Ottawa. We are going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation that will be led by Reverend Dale Stratton from Pilgrim Bible Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. We thank you, Father, for the privilege of coming to you, calling upon you. We thank you, Lord, for these men and women who serve our city. We ask that you'll give to them the wisdom they need to make the decisions that come before them. We ask, Lord, that your blessing would be upon our city as we enter this new year, and give the guidance throughout and the blessings throughout that we need. And again, bless this body in a special way. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Reverend Stratton. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate your words. That moves us on to the consent agenda, which includes minutes from the study session on December 4th, December 11th, December 18th, 2017, as well as regular meetings on December 6th and December 20th. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I make the motion we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Right, motion carries. That moves us on to our regular agenda. Under public comment, is there individuals who have registered for public comment today?
No.
Okay. Under declaration, at this time I'd like to give commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication that they might have had that would influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Commissioners?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I have had outside communication with Calvin Rosie, who is on items 10 and 11, and with Charlotte O'Day for items 16 and 17. And I don't not believe that it will cause me to consider the issues impartially. And if there's any was loud.
I know.
If there's any information that has not been brought forward, then I'll do so after we hear from them. So.
Okay, thank you for telling us about that. Commissioners? Seeing no additional declaration, we will move on to new business.
A public hearing for the purpose of considering condemnation of a mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln.
This public hearing has been called for the consideration of the condemnation of a single-family mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln. City staff will present the details of the request for the condemnation. And I believe we'll be hearing from Jim Sherman, but before we do that, I'm going to open this hearing. Mr. Sherman?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. This is a reoccurring public hearing. We first brought this before the Commission on November 1st. There was no action taken on it at that time. Staff went back to the original declaration of dilapidation and the reasons why, updated some information, presented a study session, and now we're back before you again on this structure. It was previously abandoned and declared dilapidated. The structure is a pre-1976 mobile home, which means that there's no standard to use to upgrade it. Our zoning ordinance also talks about it's a non-conforming use when it's pre-1976. That's when it also loses its 360-day abandonment. Staff can go back to 2012, but we know utilities through 2014 have been disconnected and abandoned, so it meets the criteria for zoning and our dangerous structures and dilapidated structures. We'd be glad to answer any questions, and I'm glad to hear your consideration.
Commissioners, are there questions that you have for Mr. Sherman? All right, seeing none, we will open it up to the public. Does anybody wish to be addressed on this particular matter at 820 South Lincoln? Yeah, come forward. Make sure you state your name and where you live.
My name is Calvin Rosie. I live at 2319 Douglas Road, Princeton, Kansas. I purchased this mobile home and kind of just to bring, we're reiterating what we had talked about before. On the property, with the city's definition of a manufactured home, this is a mobile home, and it doesn't apply to the 1976 HUD manufactured home guidelines with the city's definition. Also, I had purchased the home in April of 2014, and within the first week had asked for utility service to be connected there, and was told that it had to go through the codes administration, and that basically put that on stall. So I am requesting that time served then. The commissioners have been giving three different dates as far as when the former owner had quote unquote abandoned the property based on the utilities, and the ones, oh shoot, I don't know if we need to go through all those, but originally it was June of 2014, which if I bought it and requested in April of 2015, I would have been under the year, quote, the grandfathered time limit. Their second hearing, the letter that was sent to the commissioners said August of 2013 is what they're claiming now, because they're saying that the water had been shut off before. I tried to confirm that with the utility department, which I had talked to before, and had given me the August 2014 date as far as when it was shut off. And at that time, they said they couldn't give me any information, which was kind of spurious because they had talked to me before and confirmed the August date, but now all of a sudden they couldn't confirm the city's, what Wendy is saying, the city's date of the 13.
That was
And
August of what date?
Yeah.
August of 14 is
Of 14, okay.
what they had said.
But Mr. Rosie,
No, I'm sorry, 13. August of
13.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
you initially said that you purchased the property in April 2014.
14,
Okay, and then you,
right?
okay.
Well, I'm sorry, April of 15 is when I purchased the property. And August of 14 is when the utility department had told me that the utilities were shut off. And then when I went back to confirm if there was a different date for the water, they couldn't tell me any information. So I'm just questioning the truth. I'm trying to figure out why I wasn't privy to that information from the same department that told me before. But nonetheless, also we had been told about mobile homes that they couldn't be fixed, that couldn't be repaired, because they were non-conforming as to the zoning. And I recently found out that there is a property that had a permit pulled and has been repaired. And so it seems that the administration is enforcing some and not enforcing some. And I don't understand what would be the problem with that. We also had, one of the situations we talked about last meeting was how would I have known purchasing this property that there was an issue with the city, or that there was a problem with zoning, or that even the fact that the city's changed the zoning. I tried to pin Wendy down as far as a date when that happened, and she couldn't really even tell me when the commission had changed the zoning on that area. So I'm an investor and looking at properties. I had Croucher Abstract do the title work on the property, and through this whole thing, until 60 days after I've purchased it and tried to get utilities on, that the city says, okay, no, you just got to remove your investment. You have to remove the home, and it's just not right. I can't deal that way. That's all I have for now.
Mr. Rosie, were the utilities on at the property when you purchased it?
No, they weren't. No.
Commissioners, any questions?
How do we define, anyone can answer this question, utilities? Is it water and electricity, or both, or how do we define utilities? Wendy?
Yeah, and let me just broadly go back a little bit to the comment about 3 dates. Our date that we used in the hearing previously was the inspection that was done by one of the inspectors in 12. That was the date we used for when we determined that it had been abandoned. But Mr. Rosie questioned that relative to the utilities and made a comment that they were disconnected in 14. And so we did a thorough review, Finance Department did, on the utility records, and then they sent those to us. And as I shared with you on the history document, we typically look, Commissioner Skidmore, at any of the 3, but in this case, water was turned off in August of 2013. And Mr. Rosie had said something about 2014, so that was part of what we were researching for. The electric was turned off in June of 2014, and the sewer was cut off at that point too, because the previous owner applied for a demolition permit. And when we receive an application from an owner for a demolition permit, we can't issue that until all the utilities have been cut and severed and blocked, whether that's gas or our utilities that the city provides. And so that work, those utilities were requested to be off, and they were removed in June. By the end of June, they were removed between the 27th and the 30th of June of 2014. But as I told you, our determination of occupancy using the more liberal date was August of 2013. The more conservative date is the one in which we viewed the structure and determined that it appeared to be abandoned, which was in 2012. So we reviewed it after his questioning, but once the water is not servicing a structure, it's not occupiable.
Do you know, Wendy, is the title company, are they privy to this information, or do they include that in any kind of title work?
Not that I know
I
of.
just wasn't aware. Okay.
And yeah, I can't answer questions about who's allowed to get utilities on a structure as far as data on that. I can't answer that. I have to be a utility representative.
So looking at this just a little different way, is it appropriate to say that these utilities and that this structure has been, in city terms, officially abandoned since August 2013?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Lee?
Go ahead.
No. If I was an investor purchasing a property and I inquired about the utilities, how would I find out when the shut
They
off?
would call the utility desk.
Okay.
And if they aren't the current owner, there are some prohibitions or some concerns about what information we release about utilization. So I'm sure they can answer that. I know when I buy a structure, I usually ask for some sort of a rounded history so that I'm not looking at their usage, but a general sense of what does the structure have. But I don't really know that.
Would we have that in writing anywhere, or as far as,
The
Well,
history of the property, when it was
yeah.
turned off?
yeah,
Yes, it's in their computer
or
system.
be able to provide it to an investor?
I can't answer that.
Okay.
Wendy Lee, Mr. Rosie had mentioned that he's not able to obtain a permit to remodel because of the age of the structure, but mentioned that there was another one that he had got information on that was able to get a permit. Do you have any information on any trailers, manufactured homes or anything like that recently that was able to obtain a permit?
I don't, but Jim apparently does, so I'll let him answer that.
Yes, there is,
Okay.
and it was after 1976.
Okay, and that's what I was getting at, is if there was anything, if it was a similar structure, but to me, if it's not, it's post-dating 1976, then I guess it's not a similar structure.
Yes, and I've kept good dialogue with friends across the state, and I contacted a couple out in the western side of Kansas where this issue is more prevalent and they deal with this daily, and he walked me through some of the standards on rehabbing a mobile manufactured home.
Okay.
And so that permit was issued. It took a while to get the permit out the door because of it is a mobile manufactured home, but yes, we do have one out right now.
Okay.
Mr. Finch, can you, for individuals who may be just tuning in or may be listening to this, can you explain the significance of the 1976 date and why that is a conversation that we're having here tonight?
Yeah, I can, and I think Jim can add detail if necessary, but the 1976 date is the first date that the federal government stepped in and started having what we'll call generally manufactured housing inspected and built to a certain standard, and that's called the HUD standard. And it is fairly universal in the zoning regulations and manuals around the country that you see that date as a date before which manufactured housing is not favored, and after which you can go in and remodel and do things because it was built to a certain spec, a certain standard that everyone knows. And that's because before that, there was no universal standard for these manufactured homes as they were produced. And one person might do it a certain way and run the wiring in one part of the house, and another might do it completely different. And so just as we have building codes now so that everything built within a certain time frame is built to a certain standard, that's exactly what the HUD standards did in 1976 for manufactured housing.
Okay, thank you. Are there additional individuals who would like to make a presentation on this item?
Speak again. I bring to your attention as far as the dates. Sorry, I didn't make
That's okay.
copies, but-
Any comments that you're going to make, you're going to have to make at
Okay.
the microphone.
No problem.
So we want to make sure that closed caption is available for all of our citizens.
Thank you.
Mhm.
This is a property statement from the commissioners that's saying that the utilities, I believe in that one, it says August. No, yeah, August of
April.
April of 14, and the house had been vacant since. Here's a property information form on the property that it was, I guess, looked at, and this was dated August 14th, 2017. And it states that the utilities placed on hold August 15, 2014. And I realize you were having a contest as far as what the date is. And, really, are we, if it's a month or 2 months over, I mean, is it that technical, or is the issue that it's a mobile home?
If you'll hand it to our. Any additional input for the public hearing at 820 South Lincoln?
The other issue is now, all of a sudden, we're calling the property dangerous. And I had, on the previous, in November, I had sent the copies of the emails from Jim saying that it wasn't the condition of the property that it questioned, it was the zoning. And I also have another from the Community Development Department saying that staff was unable to obtain entry to the structure. So then how could it be dangerous if they couldn't even get in it? And, point I'm making is the structure of the house isn't dangerous, and it is certainly repairable. The HUD, again, from what my attorney has said, that the HUD, the 1976 thing, by your definition, deals with modular homes, not mobile homes. So, and I understand the problem, and it might, because they're all manufactured, right? But your definition says there has a differential, and your definition excludes mobile homes from the manufactured home list. So there is a difference in your eyes.
Mr. Rosie? How large is that lot?
What's that?
How large is the lot?
The lot I have is 2 lots combined.
Okay.
And it's 50 by 125, I believe.
Okay.
Whereas a standard lot is 25 by 125. Again, that would, if it was a single lot, which the house is only on 1 lot. So I plan to sell the other lot anyway, and if I can't fix it, I mean, if they're going to tear the other one down, but if I can, because it's not on that lot.
And there's, it appears, I drove by it, the lot that's to the north of it, there's runners and utilities.
That's not mine, that's
not
somebody
yours, okay.
else's.
But there is runners underneath this trailer house?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's anchored down and
Okay.
everything.
And it's large enough to build upon a 50-foot lot?
Mine would be. Mine meets the 6,000 square foot requirements, but the question is, would I want to invest in a new property or a modular or mobile manufactured home on there?
Okay.
And I'm not sure I do.
Okay. And I was just looking at the county appraised value of the property, and the building itself has 0 value according to the county.
Well, it wouldn't for the county because it would be taxed by the state. I have to pay tax to the state on it anyway because it's a mobile home.
Okay.
It's taxed like a vehicle, you're saying,
Right, it's taxed like a
Okay,
vehicle.
I see.
Okay.
Which is another issue that we'd certainly have to take care of here if it's condemned, because I can't pay tax that would, somehow the state's going to have to know that it's destroyed.
And is the mobile home or whatever it is, trailer house, it's a 1965 model?
No, sir, it's a 74.
Okay. All right, the county has the information wrong on their website.
Right, it's
Okay.
wrong. I don't know if it's updated, but I've got the title right here.
Okay.
I do have the title here, and it's
Okay.
74. So 2 years, again, is the contest.
Commissioners, additional questions? Anybody from the public who would like to address this matter on 820 South Lincoln? If not, I will close this public hearing. That moves us on to item 11.
A resolution to condemn an unsafe and dangerous mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln in the city of Ottawa, Kansas.
This resolution authorizes this governing body to declare the mobile home structure located at 820 South Lincoln to be unsafe or dangerous, and to direct that structure be removed and accessory structures be demolished. Commission, I would entertain a motion if there is one. There doesn't appear to be a motion, so we will.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
for purposes of discussion, I move that the resolution described in item 11 be approved.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion among commissioners.
I guess I just do have one clarifying question. What date was the actual trigger point for the 1 year where no utilities? Was it the April, no, June of 14?
2013.
August 2013 is when the water was turned off.
And that's the trigger point we're talking
Well,
about, that starts the 1
When
year?
we first started this, we were looking at a 2012 date because that's when we determined that it appeared to be vacant. and not occupied, but the water wasn't turned off. It had very little use in there, but water was not turned off until August of 2013. And if somebody's a single person living in there, it may not have had much water
Okay.
use.
So on this report here, was this an incorrect date?
I don't know what report you have there.
This was something,
Okay.
I think this was the memorandum that we had worked off of until Mr. Rosie raised the questions about the utility records. And we had June of 14 because that's when the order went down to disconnect all the remaining utilities. Okay? So, and he had used an August date of 14, I think, in the hearing, and so there was some confusion in that hearing that we had last fall. That's why we asked for a detailed report of every utility from the utility department.
But Mrs. Lee, the standard is 12 months.
Yes, if you have, well, from a non-conforming standpoint, so we have two issues here, okay? So from the zoning piece was the non-conforming piece, which was that these structures that were pre-June of 1976 were non-conforming structures in the community. And that standard has been in place since the late 1980s. Okay, that exact language in mobile home or in mobile park. Okay, that has been in place for some time, and what we allowed for is in a non-conforming structure, you are allowed to continue a non-conforming as long as it is continuously occupied or operated, depending on what kind of non-conforming it is, occupied with no longer than a year gap. And that's what the non-conforming language has also said. That's per statutes and federal case law. And so that was one trigger. When the previous owners were contacted about the vacancy of the structure, the lack of maintenance and the deterioration, whether that's mowing, bushes, the fact that there were appliance and parts of the occupancy located outside the house unit, asking them to repair, when we began that conversation prior to Mr. Rosie, they would have been able to do what they needed to do to continue occupancy. They chose not to do that, and in fact came and applied for demo permits ultimately. That's when we applied. That's back then is when we began addressing it as a structure that was deteriorating, vacant, and causing a blight to the neighborhood.
Mrs. Lee, have you heard from residents about this particular property?
Yes.
Multiple residents?
I can't tell you who because most people don't leave a name. I know of one in particular that today is nearby that apparently made a comment about that they were quite disappointed that we hadn't already acted, and they were concerned that we hadn't even acted several years ago. But I don't know for sure if we've heard from multiple neighbors or it's the same one that just calls in and talks to different people.
But nevertheless, you've heard from citizens in our
Yes, that were
community about their concern about this particular property.
That's oftentimes how it remains on the list for continued response on our part. That's sometimes what drags it up to the top of the list, in fact.
so really, no matter who would have purchased this property, it was dead on arrival at the time it was purchased, it sounded like, right?
Yes. And the owners should have disclosed the status of the situation as far as the occupancy and the fact that we had communicated with them about concerns about the structure and its continued use.
But Mrs. Lee, is it the city's responsibility to disclose that?
If somebody calls us, we do disclose it.
Okay.
Because it is a concern for a potential buyer, whether it's a commercial building or a residential building. If there is a known data in the file that we're communicating about structures based on our concerns about continued occupancy or use, we do disclose that.
And to your knowledge, was that conversation ever had about this particular property?
No, we found out that the property owners were considering selling, and we followed up with a letter at that point asking them to be sure and communicate that.
Commissioners? Other discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I might, and not to in any way step on the commission's conversation, but I just wanted to remind you from a legal standpoint, kind of where we're at this juncture. If the commission chooses not to proceed tonight with this resolution, what will happen? At that point, the condemnation would cease, but there is still no legal authority for the building inspector or for the planning department to allow for utilities to be restored to this property. To do that, you would have to direct staff to go back in and change the law from what it has been since the late 80s and allow for these mobile homes, modular homes, manufactured homes, all of which are, the terminology is used interchangeably in both federal and state law, you would have to go back and change what has been the law for almost 30 years now and direct staff to change that so that you can now get permits, and we would have to adopt in some way a new code to cover repairs to these structures for which there is no code. So that's what happens if you vote no, and I would ask if you do that you at least give staff that appropriate direction because otherwise the property will continue to sit and deteriorate as no permits can be granted on the property because of its non-conforming status.
Any questions, commissioners, or any discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
I'll need to abstain due to a business relationship with the landowner.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes. Motion carries. That moves us on to the next item on the agenda.
A public hearing for the consideration of annexation of the property located at 426 South Beach.
This public hearing is called for the purpose of hearing public comments related to the annexation of the properties located at 426 South Beach to the city of Ottawa, Kansas. City staff will make a presentation on the proposed annexation. I believe Mrs. Lee will be addressing us once I open this public hearing, and I shall do so now. Mrs. Lee?
Good evening, Commissioners. The first hearing is for 426 and 436, and I'm not sure if I heard that. That was a correction.
426.
The first hearing should be for 426 and 436, which was how we called the hearing notice, and I asked for that change. So I just want to be clear, because there's only one annexation plan prepared for both properties.
So do we open the public hearing? I wonder for procedurally wise. Mr. Finch.
I think you can go ahead. You've opened a hearing for 426. If you want to simultaneously open a hearing for 436 and take presentations on both.
Okay.
But I think you have two separate ordinances
Yes.
for the annexation. So you can hold both hearings simultaneously, Madam Mayor, if you wish to open a hearing on 436 as well.
Okay. So I will open up the hearing for the property located at 436 South Beach. So for individuals who aren't looking at the agenda, know that those are two different separate items on our agenda. One is 426, which is item 12 on our agenda, and the other item is a public hearing for the property located at 436 South Beach, and that's item 14 on our agenda. So we're going to take those at the same time. So I'll open that one too. Thank you. So Mrs. Lee for both.
Yeah, the ordinances do have to be separate, but we had called these because of their proximity to each other. The annexation plan could be handled all together. And as you all probably, having read through it, understand it's about 25 pages long. It gets to be a lot of material to read. So when we are looking at annexation of property in a unilateral matter, which means they did not consent to the annexation, we prepare an annexation plan. Under the statutes, there are 4 reasons that you can propose that. And in these two properties, there are 3 reasons that we are submitting this annexation to you. First, will it help resolve issues of provision of services? Second, will it eliminate confusion regarding jurisdictional lines, particularly in provision for public services? Third, the annexation will make the city limits more uniform and harmonious. The parcels are abutting tracts, and I'm going to go ahead and skip to a picture just so folks can see that. These parcels are abutting, these tracts are abutting parcels that are inside the city limits, and the primary residence structure is in the city limits. These legal descriptions were created because this remnant, is what I would call it, of each is outside the city limits. And this hard, a little hard, maybe we may have to make it a little darker in here, but.
Do you have the other map that you can actually see structures? I think it's easier. Yes.
Sure. Okay, so Beach Street is right here, 7th Street being down here, and 2nd Street being to the north. So there are two little remnants here that are associated with 426. I'm sorry, this one's 426, and this is 436, and there are two little remnants for that. And they are, again, as I said, abutting the property that's inside the city where the primary residence is, and they're in the same watershed. The water and sewer are currently servicing the properties with the residential structure. The property on the north, if it were ever somehow developed, an extension from beach would need to be created and utilities would need to be extended, but we don't think that's highly likely. But if the property owner really wanted to explore that, we would be happy to do that. Currently, the green here is the sewer line, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about the utilities in a minute. The existing and future development would be better served with the city services. I don't think, because these properties also don't have frontage, okay, because they are described to be outside the city. Their frontage is up here, and you have to have at least 50 foot of frontage on a parcel in order to develop it. Okay, so just standing on their own, they really can't be developed. They can only be developed with a portion that abuts the street, unless this one were large enough for them to create a new street and construct a new street and extend new utilities. Sorry, just a second. I've got one of my pages out of order. So I go back up and show you the rest of the pictures. The harmonious nature, sorry, I should have took care of that while we were there, again goes to just trying to resolve the question of who would respond if this happened to be a grass fire. Okay, so an emergency service or other services, to be sure that there's a quick ability to know, is it in or outside the city? Does it make sense from that perspective? And can you develop without it coming into the city? Or kind of those alliances where we're going. The mill levy is one of the questions that we're required to show on our full annexation plan, which was then part of the packet. And the Commissioner Jorgensen asked us yesterday to recheck these, and so Finance did do that. And I think, yes, thank you for handing those out. There was a slight change in these, and so the tax calculation that was provided is that it would have a change of just under $2 for 426 South Beach, and for 436 South Beach it'd be 5 cents. They're just really remnant pieces, so they're just, it has a fairly little difference when you look at that that particular consideration. Again, here is the existing city limits with the hatch outs for those parcels. This again is the utility map, and this is another table that we thought we would show you, which just kind of shows what services can the city provide upon annexation. And as I shared with you on Monday, all of the services can be provided, in fact are provided to the homes that are abutting. The only thing that we said, if there was a need for construction of new streets, then that would be different. But that's only on the large parcel. The two smallest ones really wouldn't have any ability to do that. So our conclusion then was that this meets the statute test And we would recommend that these remnant pieces be annexed into the city.
Any questions for Mrs. Lee regarding her presentation to us on items, at properties located at 426 South Beach and 436 South Beach? Any questions? Is there anybody from the public that would like to address these two properties, 426 South Beach and 436 South Beach? Anybody who would like to make a presentation on this item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. And that will move us on to item 13 on the agenda.
Madam Mayor, just point of clarification, you're closing both public hearings? You had two open.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pardon me. I'm closing the public hearing for 426 South Beach and the public hearing for 436 South Beach, both at 7:40. We will still move on to item 13.
An ordinance annexing land to the City of Ottawa located at 426 South Beach.
Now, this item is only for the ordinance that would annex the land to the City of Ottawa located at 426 South Beach. I would entertain a motion if there is one.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the ordinance to annex the land at 426 South Beach.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion among commissioners? I might just add that I actually grew up down the street from both of these properties, and I wouldn't have had a clue that they weren't in the city of Ottawa, and I could say that I probably spent a little bit of time at both of those locations, and if I were to have been hurt or there would have been a fire, the city would not have, even though they're right down the street, been able to respond. And so I do think it's appropriate to annex this property, and I will be voting yes on the next property if there's a motion to do so. Any other discussion? If not, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes. Motion carries. So that will skip item 14 on our agenda since we've already had the public hearing for 436 South Beach, and that will move us on to item 15 on the agenda.
An ordinance annexing land to the City of Ottawa located at 436 South Beach.
This ordinance annexes the land to the City of Ottawa located at 436 South Beach. I would entertain a motion if there is one.
Madam Mayor, I'll make the motion. We approve item number 15 on our agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion among commissioners? If not, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes. Motion carries. That moves us on to item 16 on the agenda.
A public hearing for the consideration of annexation of the property located at 241 North Cherry.
This public hearing is called for the purpose of public comments related to the annexation on the property located at 241 North Cherry to the City of Ottawa, Kansas. City staff will make a presentation on the proposed annexation. And Mrs. Lee, would you like to address this? I will open the public hearing now.
Good evening. Again, for the sake of just real quick conclusion, I'm going to skip down, show a picture, and then come back so that everybody's familiar with the tract. So this tract is south of Logan, south of K68, abuts the river, and is at the end, if you would call it that, the end of North Cherry, south of K68. So we'll go back up here to the principal reasons for this annexation. Again, is to allow the city and other jurisdictions to effectively resolve provision of services, to eliminate confusion regarding the jurisdictional lines, and third, to make the city limits line more uniform and harmonious. Those are the three that the statute we felt applied in this particular case. This parcel has, let me go down to the aerial. Oh, sorry, not terribly helpful because we've got the hatching across there. But there is a residential structure and some accessory structures here on this parcel. And the property is currently served with well and septic system, as we discussed briefly on Monday. We believe that the property would benefit from the planning in the area, as well as the provision of police and fire and other city services that would be available to them. As you know, because we now have city limits going all the way to I-35, there's certainly patrolling by police that also occurs out that way. Did have a conversation with one of the representatives in the family today to let them know that there had been an error relative to this table here with the tax situation, similar to what we reported to in the last hearing, and that this tax estimation is significantly lower than what was in the annexation plan itself when we sent that to them. And so the difference would be just under $250 annually. And as we said to you on Monday, depending on their insurance and how they do that, residential doesn't necessarily have the same impact and reduction in cost of insurance that a commercial can and often does, but it can have an impact depending on the insurer. And so we hope that they would make sure, if this property is annexed, to be sure to identify that to their insurance as well. So, as I said, the property is currently served with with a water well and a septic service. Our municipal code requires that if you're within 200 feet of a sanitary line, you would connect. And one of the questions that was asked on Monday, and again from the family, was about that. This property is significantly further than 200 feet, so there would be no requirement to connect to the sanitary service unless it's extended. Because this area has a force main in this general area, and because of the topography there, I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon. As I told you on Monday, we have some easements that go across property here because it is planned in our long-range plan to extend an additional crossing from the treatment plant to serve the north and northeast area. And it would make more sense if there was a need someday in the future, if that septic failed and no additional septic could be placed there, that service be provided using gravity system to the south more so than working on a system trying to go against that and requiring a pump. Currently, the property receives power, and the water is also not that close, but could be extended if there was a problem with their water service. And what I offered to the family was, if something became a problem with their system and they wanted to make a request, then we could do that. The plan calls for us to extend it within 5 years, but there is no requirement in the municipal code for water connection. And so the governance really over septic and well water is by the state, KDH&E, and then with the county. But we don't require any inspections or connections based on that. The rest of the provision of services, as far as roads, snow clearance, et cetera, is provided by the city because North Cherry is inside the city limits. Fire goes to the properties to the north, but would technically not be responding in this circumstance.
Yeah, that's a question I had, Wendy, on this thing, was if this house caught on fire and they called the fire department, would our fire department know that's not in the city? It should be a rural fire department
Because
issue?
911 has the maps as part of what they do with the county, they should know that, but that's part of the issue, is that it would lead to some confusion as to who's responding. That's one of the reasons we look at these things, as well as folks that are already receiving benefits of being near to or generally within the city limits. In fact, I found today when we were looking through all the rest of the cleanup, as I told you originally, in 2015-16 is when we started looking at, when the urban growth agreement went away, what were the remaining parcels that were receiving maybe a utility or abutting a road that we were already providing services to and maintenance of and snow clearance, et cetera. And this was one of the parcels identified, but an older record indicates actually we asked them in 2005 and in 2006 to consider a consent annexation. We didn't pursue it unilateral at that time, but we also didn't have in at that time, and maybe it was around the same time Neosho came in, but when Neosho's property was fully annexed, it did create more of this kind of a gap thing. And and maybe that parcel, it may have gone all the way down, but the development of it certainly led us to have a lot of conversations about provision. And as you know, we've continued to look at the provision of services in this general area. And that, from a planning standpoint, is another reason to have properties inside, is so that we can extend those services and make good plans for the development of parcels or the redevelopment. This one's, not necessarily that likely to develop, but if they wanted to do something different or have additional units, it's a possibility. Or someone in the future. Certainly not a requirement. Happy to answer any questions, but then I know there's representatives in the room, so.
Any questions, pardon me, any questions for Mrs. Lee regarding the property on 241 North Cherry?
Well, Mrs. Lee, I guess follow-up to my question was, then the residents should be able to contact their home insurers and maybe get a reduction on their rates as well?
They would at least want to make sure if they can. Again, it depends on who's providing the service, but yes, if it were to be annexed, that is something I would urge to be done.
Any additional questions for Mrs. Lee on 241 North Cherry? All right, thank you, Mrs. Lee. Are there other individuals who wish to address the matter of annexing land at 241 North Cherry?
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening. Tell us who you are.
I'm Tim Mathias, Fire Chief. Just to give some further explanation on Commissioner Skidmore's question on responding to that particular call. There have been some confusion throughout the city on city limits, who goes, who doesn't go. Currently, we have an enhanced 911 system for the county. So if you call from your home phone, it'll give your address. And with that, it'll give you the responding fire department that should respond there. In this current situation, we would not be the first on the list. We do have a very good agreement with LOH Fire that surrounds the city. We would be there. Eventually, we would not be the first to be notified. Now, if you call from your cell phone, that's a whole other story. That doesn't take your address into consideration. So that there's some confusion there. And then on to the insurance side of things, we are currently ISO rated 3 community, and your fire insurance is calculated on your ISO rating. 1 is the top, 10 is the bottom. Currently, LOH is a 6. They're trying to get to a 5. We're trying to get to a 2, but currently it's 3 and 6. So if they can contact their insurance company and possibly could reduce their fire insurance.
Thank you. Any question? I should have asked. Are there questions for Chief Mathias? No. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I guess not. Are there other individuals who would like to address the annexation of 241 North Cherry? Other individuals?
I do have a question.
If you'd like to come to the microphone.
I do have a question if the property owner wants this or not.
Mrs. Lee, would you like to address this matter? No? Okay. Sure.
I am the property owner, and I have
Tell us who you are.
Charlotte O'Day.
Yeah.
In the last 2 days, I have spoke with Blake and Blaine and Wendy. We have contested this. Every time it's been proposed to us, we had absolutely no interest in being annexed. We didn't see the incentive. You've argued very good points. You've answered a lot of our questions. At first, yes, we were adamantly against it, but after the conversations that we've had and how it's been explained, we don't wish to contest.
City Attorney Finch, does that change our procedure at this point?
No, so the commission could delay this. You could continue this hearing and enter into a consent, but from what I hear the family saying is they're just dropping any opposition at this point. And so you've come this far in the process. If you want to go ahead and proceed with the annexation, I think that would be appropriate, given the time and the publication and the fact that the ordinance is ready. This would be an appropriate way to proceed. And we have, as Ms. O'Day said, I visited with her today. I know that Commissioner Jorgensen has visited with her, and as has Wendy Lee, to just try to address the concerns and questions that people have. You know, change is always a process, and learning and gathering information and understanding the why, and quite frankly for us, understanding what is the basis for a citizen's concern about something. Why are they opposed? And if we can address those major issues, maybe we can get to a point where I think we've gotten tonight that, okay, we have enough information that this, formerly scary process is now understandable, and we feel like we're more in control, and we have a feel of what's going on. So I want to thank Ms. O'Day for asking the questions, because that's how we communicate and how we work together on this, and I think this has been a positive step in how we do this, and I'm hopeful we're going to be able to provide better service and a better level of service, as the fire chief indicated, on some of these very important emergency services to this property without diminishing the way that it's currently served by some of the other services like well water or septic, without forcing changes that Ms. O'Day's mother is not quite ready for. So I think we've reached a good point here, and I think it's appropriate for the commission to proceed if they choose to.
And we're very appreciative of the explanation. I guess we want clarification as to when this goes into effect. I mean, tax-wise and, change of jurisdiction. I understand the resolution or ordinance gets filed with the Register of Deeds, but I mean, when is it fully going to go into effect?
I'll let Wendy clarify anything that I don't catch, but the statutes say that you all, if you pass an ordinance tonight, as you did on the other two properties, if you were to do the same here, it has to be published, and it's effective upon publication, and then at that point a copy has to be sent over to the county clerk and the county register of deeds for recording with the register of deeds, and also so the clerk will know for tax purposes. It's my understanding it will not affect taxes until the December payment in
18.
They'll certify, and I think it's in 2019
So it'll get reevaluated January 1
of next year.
of next year.
Yeah.
So if she's paid the taxes in full.
Did you pay the taxes in full?
And those taxes were for 2017.
Right.
that she paid,
Right.
so.
Right. So there would be some proration of the 2018 taxes, but again, they will not be due. First half would be due December of 2018. Second half, or in total
Right.
payment, if she chooses to delay, could be made in, it was April
May.
now? April or May? Yeah, I know that they were changed, but May of 2019. So there will be no immediate change to taxes, or I assume, I don't know if there's an escrow or not, but this will be effective upon publication of the ordinance, is the statute. That's what it
Gotcha.
says.
Okay, that makes sense.
I understand that Ms. O'Day is asking about fiscal change, but automatically then she becomes eligible for fire service, police service.
The
City
services-
services automatically happen.
Those are provided the day the ordinance is published.
Okay.
And while Mrs. O'Day is there, have you checked on the insurance difference being from an ISO 6 to an ISO 3?
I don't believe she has, but we will.
Okay, that would really that could make a difference on the 246 extra your taxes.
Yeah,
you're
that's
paying.
what we were discussing.
And I wonder if Chief Matthias would tell us the estimated ETA, if the rural had to deal with this versus you dealing with this.
That's a really good question.
There's a lot of variables into that, and I would safely say 10 minutes or more. We can get it to anywhere in the city within 4 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
So, they do a great job, but they're in their homes, they're at work, they have to travel to the station, get the trucks, and
Because LOH is a volunteer. It's not a staffed fire department.
is a complete volunteer.
And LOH
department.
stands for what?
Lincoln, Ottawa, Harrison Townships. They all three encompass the city of Ottawa, and I don't know the year, but they
Unified.
merged into one department probably 15 years ago, I'm guessing. So,
So your estimate would be 10 minutes or more?
yeah, yep. So, any others?
Any other questions?
So I might also add, Commissioners, my experience, this is not an unusual situation in cities where you have an isolation like this. And I know the last fire chief and I visited about this, and if Tim and I haven't visited about it, then he'll hear it now. But my philosophy is, when in doubt, we send our fire trucks, and we let whatever has to be worked out later be worked out. But our job, if it's within our vicinity, is to protect life and property, but more importantly, life. So some of these peculiar things we have, you have to understand that sometimes it's a judgment call on the fire department's call. And the most important thing that he told you was that depending upon whether you get a call from a cell phone or a landline, that dispatch, which dispatches these things out, works on a map, and they make a judgment call as to who they issue that call to.
And City Manager Nysta is absolutely correct. We, in the past, have responded to calls right on the edge, not knowing whose responsibility that is, and we'd most definitely respond to any of these pockets, isolation properties. But he's exactly right. The dispatch has to make that call. If it was a county call, our system doesn't open up for county calls, so there is a delay in if it's in the city or within our area of response. Then there's a few minutes there that has to get figured out, and then they'll page us out. So it's not a huge delay, but as we all know in emergencies, that could make a difference. So.
Well, this is certainly an unorthodox public hearing, but Ms. O'Day, do you have additional questions? I mean, I guess I'm asking you now just to make, or does your mom have additional questions?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
But, I think the pamphlet that's sent out is what the huge meeting was.
Okay.
With the fire and all this other stuff, because I was not in favor of that at all. And if this is the way it's going to be, it's a matter of time. I know that. I just thought I'd go first.
We're glad you're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your mom.
In all honesty, our main concern is these.
We just use your microphone if you can, just because we do closed captioning. We want to make sure all of our citizens can hear. So
The big concern was the utilities, and if we had to pay to upgrade,
Right.
So with the clarification on that she's not forced to have to connect now, and as long as her systems are functioning and the well water is safe and healthy and, she doesn't have any issues, then we don't have any issues with that, so.
all right, perfect. Is there anybody else who would like to address the matter of annexation of 241 North Cherry? Sorry. Anybody else? All right, then I will close that public hearing. We will move on to item 17 on the agenda. Okay. It's the ordinance annexing land to the city of Ottawa located at 241 North Cherry, and this ordinance annexes the land to the city of Ottawa located at 241 North Cherry. I would entertain a motion if there is one.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner,
I move to approve the ordinance as described in item 17 of the agenda.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion among commissioners? I might just say that I really appreciate this process today. I know it's not easy, and And as our city attorney said, I mean, it's not, change is never easy. We appreciate you coming and working with us on this and being extremely civil and making sure that this can happen right. And we're so glad you're here, all of you, everyone. We're glad you're all here. Any other discussion? We will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes, motion carries. That moves us on to item 18 on the agenda.
A public hearing for the consideration of annexation of the property located at 2324 East Logan.
This public hearing is called for the purpose of hearing public comments related to the annexation of the property located at 2324 East Logan to the City of Ottawa, Kansas. City staff will make a presentation on the proposed annexation. I will open up that public hearing and yield to I always want to call you City Commissioner. It's horrible. City Attorney Finch.
You can't promote me to that office anymore, so
It's open now. You can please talk.
well, everybody, all the other city staff left, so I can't.
You're
I
making
can't
a
speak about.
presentation.
Yeah, I can't speak about fire protection or planning and zoning. But what I can tell you is we have been in touch with the owner of this property and his representation, and I believe we've worked out an agreement that will turn this into a consent annexation. And what we would ask you to do tonight is to entertain a continuance of this public hearing. The statute allows you to both open and conduct, and then to continue to another time certain, if you so choose, the public hearing. And I would ask that you continue this down to your February 7th meeting so that we can continue working on the details of the agreement. And I think by then we'll have for you an actual agreement, an annexation agreement. We'll probably be pulling that. You'll reopen the hearing that night and then just swiftly close it, and we'll move on to the consent annexation. But I think this is, again, an example of what happens when you take the time to find out what are the real concerns and see if you can address them. And I think we'll be turning this into a consent annexation.
Any questions for our city council?
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move to continue the public hearing until our February 7th regular meeting.
Can we take that motion in the middle of a public hearing? Is it take a motion, or can we
Have
just
to.
continue?
Yeah, you can.
In the middle?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will close the public
Nope,
hearing.
nope.
No.
You've continued the
Sorry.
public hearing.
We've continued the public hearing. We talked about process. This is not what we talked about, but okay, that's good. Okay, we are continuing the public hearing on 2324 East Logan, and it will be continued until February 7th. That moves us to item 20 on the agenda.
Request for 2018 funding agreement.
This is the approval for funding agreement with Prairie Paws Animal Shelter. I believe that Mr. Neinstead will be addressing this matter today.
I will. Thank you, Commissioners.
Yes, thank you.
This is the last of what I would call our major allocations. We make a number of allocations out into the community every year. And what we've done in the last year is get them under contract with the city so that they know what our expectations are, and we set some expectations for them. Now, Prairie Paws is a unique organization because the county also funds Prairie Paws, much like the county also funds FCDC. With the FCDC, we have a joint contract. With Prairie Paws, we have a single contract on our part, but perhaps we can get that down to one contract in the future. But in 2018, the city is allocating $52,026 to Prairie Paws. And the public might say, well, that's a lot of money. And they are exactly right. But what that does is Prairie Paws is basically, we operate a very basic animal control, and Chief Butler can, if you really want to get into details, can talk to you about that. But we don't operate an animal shelter or an animal control department. We contract with Prairie Paws to do that. And it benefits the city, and it benefits Prairie Paws, and they are able to take the time to deal with volunteers and to deal with animals humanely that we take to them. And they also provide us some other services also in return. But some of the things that we require Prairie Paws to do for those funds are provide timely and effective housing for stray animals picked up by the Ottawa Police Department or brought in by Ottawa citizens. And I can tell you that we would pay considerably more if we had this service in-house. Provide humane care and treatment of such animals, including food, water, shelter, and necessary veterinarian care during the 3-day open period. Work to provide temporary housing and marketing to ensure adoption of these animals after the hold period. They provide dog licenses. They provide the licensing. We kind of transferred that function to them, and they take care of that. And they serve as an advisor to us, to the city commission, regarding animal health issues. And most recently, they worked with us on colony of feral cats, and it has made a difference. So that real briefly for the public and for you is what this contract is about.
City Manager Neinstead, if we did not have this agreement with Prairie Paws Animal Shelter, would the City of Ottawa be able to, for $52,000 and change, be able to conduct the same exact service that we get from Prairie Paws?
No, we would not, Mayor.
Because it is a considerable amount of money.
It is a considerable amount of money.
But we would not be able to do so for $52,000 a year.
We would not.
Any other questions?
Well, Madam Mayor, I want to say Melissa does a great job with your program out there, you and your staff. You continually, every year, do a great job. I know you search out grants, you search out gifts in kind, you have very creative fundraisers, you use social media to the max, and so I really think this is a great investment of our community. Yes, it's a lot of money, but the alternative is much worse. I agree with you, and I think we've got a great program what we have right now.
And we could not run it as well as what Melissa and
totally
her
agree with
group
that,
out there. And I would just say this, and Melissa did not pay me to say this, but they need volunteers out there.
Absolutely.
And you just don't go out and volunteer. You go out and you go through training and you are supervised. But the backbone, the reason this is a success, not only because of Melissa, but also because of the volunteers and the volunteer board that serves to help steer that organization.
It's true.
I might want to say, and I probably should have said this during declaration, but my daughters and I are all three of us are volunteers at Prairie Paws, and we actually do go out and socialize animals, so I don't think that actually changes my
I think
right to
Melissa
vote.
said you had a little bit of extra training. I don't know.
Yeah,
what that
no, there's not a ton of extra training that I got, but I got ample training to do what we do. So,
And with all that said, I move that we approve the item listed number 20 for the funding agreement.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion among commissioners? If not, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank
And I
you.
would be remiss in saying that one of the other services that they offer out there are adoption services. So if you are looking for a pet in your family, go see Prairie Paws.
That's right.
That brings us to item 21 on the agenda.
Request for approval of resolution naming park features.
The Play Task Force would like to approve to establish pickleball courts at the former skate park location and permission to name them Ed Taylor Pickleball Courts. They are also asking permission to name the basketball courts at Goppert Teen Park for the 1971 state basketball champions and the 2013 state basketball champions. I believe Mrs. Lee will be making a presentation on this item.
I'd be glad to. On behalf of the Play Task Force, who you heard from members of on Monday, Fonda Rose and Chad Bruner were also available then. to discuss these items with you. First, they were recommending the establishment of pickleball courts, but they further recommended, the group did unanimously, about the naming requests. The basketball courts were originally slated on the list of naming gifts that was presented to the commission several years ago before we developed the theme park as gifts of $10,000. And these two teams have, by donors' arrangements, pledged to do that. We received all of the money for the 2013 champion group, and we're very, very close on the other group. And they've let us know that they will have the funding given to us in the next couple of months. But I think we're just under about $8,500, I think. So, and the second gift or area was the pickleball courts, and Shirlene Taylor approached us about doing a memorial gift recognizing her husband, John Ed Taylor, who was a county commissioner for 12 years. And we had a discussion about what would the cost be and what would the process be. And after some thought, she elected to donate the entire amount that it would take to do the installation of pickleball courts. Typically, a naming gift is, we approach it, can sometimes be half, or it can be a little bit more than half, or just a significant portion of that project. So by naming, or by providing the funds for the entire amount, she has surpassed what we typically do for a naming opportunity. And so the Play Task Force 100% endorses this. And then if you want, I can tell a little bit more about pickleball, but we got a little bit of information about that from Fonda Rose in particular, as well as Chad Bruner, because Fonda's been teaching that at the middle school now for 15 years. She shared with us on Monday. And the ORC's been providing several different opportunities throughout the week in order to do that on an indoor basis. This would provide for them to be located east of the Woodward Center on what was the skate park slab, and previous to the skate park it was tennis courts in an outdoor format. So it would provide for the striping, the nets, the posts, 4 sets of bleachers, and signage.
Any questions for Mrs. Lee regarding her presentation? If not, I will entertain a motion if there is one.
Madam Mayor,
Commissioner.
I move to approve the resolution naming these park features as described in item 21 of the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion among commissioners? If not, we will proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Kaler?
And I vote yes. Motion carries. That brings us on to item 22 on our agenda, which is report by our city manager. City Manager Neinstead.
Couple things, Commissioners. I would be remiss if I didn't draw attention to the fact that we have 2 former county commissioners in the office that in the city commission meeting room this evening that we have worked with over the years. Former County Commissioner Hood and former County Commissioner Stoudemire.
And also former County Commissioner Tom Wygant.
Oh, Tom, wow. I never worked with Tom as a county. Sorry, Tom.
Look at that.
So, and I believe, Tom, you were with the county commission that expanded from 3 to 5, right?
Absolutely.
All right. A little bit of history there. The other thing, just real quickly, I'll tell you, is that we've had a resignation off the Planning Commission. That's one of our positions outside the city. And we've had 2 off.
One resignation, one open.
What?
One's a resignation, one open.
Anyway, we have openings on the, our accessibility advisory board, and we're going to be doing a short advertisement for those, and I know that we already have at least one application for one of those boards, which we'll be bringing to you in the next couple of weeks. Those are important boards to the city. So.
Great. Anything additional? No. Okay. That moves us on to a report by City Commissioners. City Commissioner Graves.
I have no report.
City Commissioner Skidmore.
I have nothing.
And City Commissioner Jorgensen.
Just real quickly, we had several items this evening that were tough items to consider, and it's one of the capacities that a city commissioner does. It works in a kind of a quasi-judicial role to weigh the evidence that's provided to us in these instances. It's not always popular decisions that the city commission has to make, but they're ones that we have to weigh the ordinances that have been passed by previous commissions, also the public good, and also how it affects the property owners in these situations. So it's one of those. It's hard work, and I'd just like to thank the commission for the job that they did this evening.
Thank you. City Commissioner Crowley.
I have none.
Okay. That moves us on to report by the mayor. A couple things that I want to highlight. I want to thank the city crews for offering the citizens of Ottawa an opportunity to ice skate. We haven't had that opportunity in several years, and so if you don't know what I'm talking about, we have a very, very temporary ice skating rink that is now located in Forest Park. So you should drive around and look. I know the other day, actually yesterday, I went by and took my kids by there, and there were over 20 people that were ice skating. Although the funny part about it is that not one of them had ice skates on, but they were having a great time. So, and what a creative way to keep us active in the community, because we do tend to be a bit sedentary when it is this cold. So bravo to the city crews for doing so. Lastly, this will be our last official meeting in which Commissioner Crowley will be with us, and I want to publicly thank him for the service that he did. He stepped into a role that he voluntarily asked for. So thank you, Commissioner Crowley. We appreciate you being here, and we hope that we see you often.
Thank you.
Yes. And this will also be the last time that I'll be sitting here behind this microphone. So I do want to thank citizens, the amazing citizens that we have with the City of Ottawa for bearing with me for almost the last 2 years. I know at times I've been told by individuals in this room that I can be a bit wordy, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm not sorry, actually. I do appreciate the amazing citizens that we have, though, in the City of Ottawa, and that's what makes our city so great. So thank you for allowing me to serve as your mayor. That moves us on to announcements. On the 8th of January, we will have a study session in which we will be swearing in our elected officials, including Mr. Wigan, who will be joining us on the City Commission. We will have a reception for our outgoing commissioner and mayor immediately following. The public is certainly invited, and we would love to have you there. Our meeting does start at 4 o'clock. It's supposed to be a light agenda, so I don't anticipate it going extremely long, but please come if you can. On the 15th of January is Martin Luther King Day, and we have no study session as city offices are closed. And then on the 24th of January, the League of Kansas Municipalities hosts the Local Government Day in Topeka at the Capitol that begins at 9:45. If there's nothing else to be brought forth to the commission tonight, we will adjourn until our study session on the 8th of January.